Welcome back to
Cady and
Cady's first ever Christmas episode.
No, it's not. It's not.
But James, I know it's not an actual Christmas movie. It did come out on December 19th, though. But who other than Santa, stirs up that feeling of holiday spiritness and childlike wonder, but Mary Poppins?
It's not a Christmas episode.
It could be a Christmas episode.
But it's not.
In Disney's Mary Poppins Returns, Mary Poppins returns. More specifically, she returns to the Banks house 25 years later to find her former wards, Jane and Michael, in dire straits. The threat of foreclosure looming, Mary must apply her signature charm and style and straight up friggin' magic to help the family find their own way out of this mess. Also, Hamilton is there. So James, what did you think of Mary Poppins Returns?
I'm just going to come out right now and preface everything that I say from this point on with the fact that I do not believe that this is a bad movie. I don't. There were some things about it that I observed that didn't necessarily hit me the way that I feel like they might hit most people. And there are plenty of reasons for that, but I'm sure we'll talk about them a little bit later. I understand why you like it, I think. Mm-hmm. And I understand why people would like it, and I just might not be the core audience. But yeah, those are my general thoughts. Cady?
Yes.
What about you?
I absolutely loved it. From the moment it started until the end, I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah.
The music I enjoyed. The atmosphere of the movie I enjoyed. I guess I should preface everything I'm going to say in a similar fashion, but instead, specifically, that I grew up watching Mary Poppins. So, it meant a lot to me that this movie, wasn't terrible, and I was very anxious about it, and, knowing who was involved in it and everything kind of made me feel better. Mm. And I personally feel that my worries were for naught. And again, I very much loved it.
So let's talk about that cast, shall we?
We shall.
Starting off with the director, who is, of course, not technically a member of the cast. It was directed by Rob Marshall, who, he hasn't done a lot of things, but in reviewing his portfolio, I've seen his presence in a lot of musicals recently. He did the movie adaptation of Into the Woods.
Which I loved also.
Chicago. And then a couple of other movies that seem a little bit out of place, leading with the musical thing. He directed on Stranger Tides, the fourth Pirates of the Caribbean movie that I don't remember, do you? I
don't think I saw it.
Exactly. And Memoirs of a Geisha, which we both saw together a long time ago. And I don't remember anything about it other than I liked it. So.
I read the book too,
yeah.
But because of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
I don't remember. It was a long time ago.
I think that he was fine. At no point was I like, oh, the direction is terrible. But,
He knows how to direct a musical.
We are once again not alone in the house. So there's going to be some talking and creaking, and just think of it as we're filming on an old pirate ship.
Mm.
But yeah, director was good.
Next we have Emily Blunt, Mary Poppins herself. She was in, maybe not most recently, but she was in A Quiet Place.
Yep.
With John Krasinski, which I did see, and that was good as well.
Yep, enjoyed that.
She was in Into the Woods, which the director directed, as previously mentioned. Devil Wears Prada, which I saw the movie when it first came out. I can't even picture her in it, or really a lot of the movie.
Yeah, I've never seen it, but I actually heard an interview on NPR earlier this week with Emily Blunt about Mary Poppins Returns, in which she talked about how that was her first big important role or something. So.
Interesting. I thought she did quite well.
Obviously, your opinion is...
I loved it. Well, again, I love Emily Blunt, and before this, I loved her, and I was just a little bit anxious, as you are with any, reboot or sequel when they replace the main character with someone else, how they'll hold up. She had some of the mannerisms down pretty good. The pattern of speech was great, and I loved it a lot. Yeah,
and obviously, Cady's opinion on this probably matters much more than mine in general, because Cady is basically a Mary Poppins sommelier to my guy who occasionally drinks wine when he feels he needs more antioxidants.
Which is funny, because I hate wine.
Lin-Manuel Miranda of Hamilton fame plays Jack. this movie's Bert. I don't think I'm out of place to say that. They are the same exact archetype. And Lin-Manuel is... I'm not going to lie, this is the first thing I've ever really seen him acting in. Mm-hmm. Obviously, he's most known for his work on stage, but he did the music for Moana. Great movie, but not a lot of acting for him. Mm-hmm. He was in the most recent season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, playing himself-ish. I mean, he was a total douchebag, so I hope that he wasn't really playing himself, but... Well,
he was in Terrible People.
You're right. He did show up in that one.
As himself as well.
As himself. So it was interesting to see here. I think that he caught the crux of a character like Bert or Jack just fine, as well as Dick Van Dyke did. I find it interesting. I can't say for sure because pretty much all the music that I've listened to for the last 6 months, thanks to this one here, is the soundtrack to Hamilton. So I'm so used to hearing Lin-Manuel speaking in his normal American voice that I can't tell if his English accent was off, or it was just that I knew that it wasn't true.
I don't think it was. It was definitely. I don't want to say overdone. You can definitely tell he is a stage actor.
Yeah,
like it but it fit though because Bert was the same way. Like he had that the very Cockney sort of.
Well, exactly, and it's interesting that you bring that up because I recently found out that as a general rule. Dick Van Dyke's Cockney accent is generally considered pretty bad, which was really weird for me because as a child, that's how I found out what a Cockney accent was. So I just when I think Cockney, I think Bert, and I wonder if actually that might have factored into it because they were recasting a character that was British but was played by an American, who doesn't really do a great British accent. Maybe that's exactly why they were like Lin-Manuel, perfect.
Well, and I feel like, too, I wouldn't put it past that being a decision that was made for the character, too, is we're not trying to necessarily replace the character, but we want to kind of emulate that same feeling, so, yeah.
Yeah, and then they nailed it in that respect.
Next, we have Ben Whishaw, who is the adult Michael Banks. He is the current Q of the Bond movie universe, of which I have seen nothing. Well, I've seen one, but it's an older one, so I don't think it counts, as far as the context of this. I don't know him from anything, but I felt he had a very relatable, emotional performance, and I quite enjoyed his acting in general. Yeah,
I mean, I should probably bring it up right now with Ben Whishaw and Emily Mortimer, who played Jane, which we'll get to in a second. I thought the casting for these two was really good because there were moments when I found myself looking at them and saying, these actually do really kind of look like the original kids. Ben Wishaw's got those weird ears that kind of stick out at odd angles, just like the kid who played the original Michael. The only other thing I've seen, I've seen Cloud Atlas. He was in Cloud Atlas, weird movie. But the one that I actually enjoyed, and what I'm pretty sure I recognized him from, was Perfume, the Story of a Murderer, which is a very pretty movie that is probably not for everyone because it's kind of gross at times, but I saw it once and it made a lasting impression, and that's certainly where I recognized his face from. And I would have to agree. He was just, he was good. Emotive, and we cared about him. Mm-hmm. So
there were a few times in the movie that I did tear up a little bit, and the first one was because of him.
Emily Mortimer, who I just mentioned, she played Jane. And yeah, her listing is not all that long. I guess she was in Hugo, which I saw once and enjoyed, but I don't remember her. To be honest, I don't really remember anything but the kid, and that it was pretty. But she also does the voice of Disney Infinity's Holley Shiftwell, which I assume is a Disney character, but I couldn't tell you who or what it's from.
I have no idea.
But yes, like I said before, she was very much reminiscent of the original Jane as
the adult version.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, she was good. She was fine.
Yeah, I didn't recognize her from anything either. I don't think I've seen Hugo, so.
Yeah.
Dame Julie Walters, who played Ellen in the movie. She was the housekeeper. And I don't know why I didn't immediately recognize her, but she is Molly Weasley of the Harry Potter series. Most notably to me anyway, as an uncultured American.
It was the voice that did it for me. As soon as she walked in, as soon as I heard her voice, I was like, oh, that's who Julie Walters is.
Well, I recognized again. I was like, the whole time I was like, who is it? And then I was like, no, don't worry, just enjoy the movie. And then I kind of stopped trying to figure it out. But she was in Mamma Mia. She played Rosie. I'm not 100% sure. I'm not super familiar with Mamma Mia. I just thought it was interesting to note because several other actors in this movie alone were also in Mamma Mia. But
yeah.
She, I mean, once I realized too that she was Molly Weasley, I was just she's a very caretakery type of I don't want to say actress because I know she's been in a lot. She's been a large part of like British TV for years and years. But to me anyway, because of the whole Molly Weasley thing,
she's a maternal figure.
Yeah, the maternal. Yeah, she was quite humorous.
Not a huge role. I mean, no. she didn't have a lot of screen time, but when she did, she carried all the gravitas that she normally does when she's on screen from admittedly our limited experience as uncultured Americans.
Yeah, I think her character too was largely and did this well, like to kind of solidify the idea of the family, and she was as much a part of the family as everyone else.
Yeah, Colin Firth plays Wilkins, the bank manager. I can't really talk too much about his character without getting a little bit spoilery. Other than that, it's Colin Firth. We all know that he can act, and I don't think that his acting skill was greatly utilized in this film. But it was more about his presence than his actual acting. But of course, Colin Firth, we know him, we love him from The King's Speech, or most of us do, but I haven't seen it. Also, Mamma Mia, apparently. I only bring it up because you brought it up, and neither of us have seen it.
Well, no, but I mean, it's
true. I mean, there's a pattern.
Yeah.
He was in Kingsman. He was in Love Actually. He's sort of like your catch-all British guy these days. He's like the modern Hugh Grant. When you think I need a British guy,
who was also in Love Actually.
Yes, he was. Mm-hmm. So I mean, but when you think of a British guy in the '90s, Hugh Grant's the guy you think of. Now, I'd say it's Colin Firth.
I would agree. Of Meryl Streep, who was cousin Topsy, Mary Poppins' cousin, who is interesting to see in this film because up until this point she's been like, the magical being who has no ties to this world, and we find out she has a relative who is, just as silly as she is in certain regards. Meryl Streep was also in Mamma Mia, the starring character. She was in Into the Woods as the witch. And then a movie which I always forget exists until I was looking through her IMDb, Julie and Julia.
Oh, yes.
As Julia Childs.
Yep. And, I mean, there's so many other things. Meryl Streep is Meryl Streep.
Yeah.
I mean, she's probably, if not the most prestigious actress, American actress these days, then I don't know who is. So...
Yeah, and then she, she had a great performance as well. Again, I don't want to talk too much about the character because it was, seeing it in the movie was part of the experience.
Yeah, she did. She owned that scene.
Yeah, I don't think I knew she was in it going into it either, which made it...
You do not read credits very well.
What?
I caught all the names in the opening credits. They listed all of them.
Oh, I wasn't paying attention again.
I'm just going to roll the three kids into one. We had, Pixie Davies as Annabelle Banks, Nathaniel Saleh as John Banks, and Joel Dawson as Georgie Banks. The kids did fine. Most of them don't really have a lot in their portfolio because, they're kids. Mm-hmm. One of them doesn't have anything, is my understanding.
Yep.
Other than this. They exist mostly as kind of props in a lot of ways. The kids did fine, but the movie's really not about them, even though thematically it's kind of supposed to be. It's not unlike the first Mary Poppins. Still, obviously Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke were the stars, but I felt like the kids had a little bit more to do in that movie. In this one, they seemed a little bit less important, like to the story, even though really it's all about them and Michael.
Yeah, that's fair.
So they were there for a reason, and they were important, and the kids, I'm sure, did fine, but the characters weren't all that important in my mind.
No, that's fair. Yeah, and they were good representations of the kids who'd been forced to grow up too quick, and
So, technically, this is the normal place with spoiler warning. So consider this that.
Yes. Merry Christmas and spoilers ahead.
It's not a Christmas episode.
Spoilers ahead. Also, Merry Christmas.
So, I mean, do you have any particular thoughts that you'd like to kick us off with?
To be perfectly honest, going into this movie, I've been super psyched for it for probably since it was initially announced. I didn't take any notes as I normally do during movies. I didn't really jot anything down after the fact either. I did kind of look up some reviews and stuff just because I was curious to see how people felt about it. Because again, movies like this, when they're a remake or a sequel to an old beloved children's classic, there are always going to be the people who absolutely hate it, absolutely loved it, and there's not there is a mid ground of sorts, but it's not.
I can confirm that there is a middle ground.
No, yeah, but I mean a lot of the reviews I saw either loved it or hated it.
Yeah, I mean that makes sense.
But I didn't really go into it taking notes. I didn't really. I mean, I can acknowledge, especially after reading some of the critiques of it, where it may have had some weaknesses, where there might have been some issues. But I absolutely, from start to finish, was just I enjoyed the whole ride.
Yeah.
Beauty and the Beast was the most recent kind of remake from my childhood.
Yep.
And even that movie, I know that there are issues with it, but start to finish, I loved it too. I just kind of I went into it wanting to just enjoy the film, hopefully, as long as it wasn't terrible, and I don't think it was.
Yeah, no, it certainly was not terrible.
Yeah, but I don't really have any particular points.
Well, maybe I'll dive into my short list, and maybe we'll stumble upon something to. So, for me, once again, I am going to try to speak as non-judgmentally as possible, and merely state facts and things that I've observed. And unless I really, really feel like they're bad or good, I will please just take what I'm saying as observations rather than opinions. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, I was legally declared dead inside probably right around 2009. So, I know I can be a little harsh at times, but I'm not so dead inside that I want to spread that to anyone else. And I certainly don't want to be the guy who shits on Mary Poppins, the character or the movie itself. So, yes. The biggest thing, I in an effort to see if maybe it cut down on runtime and also just to pay attention, I deliberately did not take notes, even though I had my notebook with me. And I came home, and over the next day or two, I compiled what I remembered and I watched the original Mary Poppins. Now, one thing that I very much noticed when I was watching this movie, mm-hmm. and confirmed further when I watched the original, is that there is a lot of parallel moment. There are a lot of parallels, mm-hmm. Which obviously is intentional.
Oh yeah.
And I mean, almost all of the same beats, musically, tonally, are hit in this movie. They're in a little bit of a different order, mm-hmm. But some of them are so weirdly specific that I feel they have to be brought up. We've got most of the songs have more or less an equivalent in the original. Mm-hmm. There's the opening song, Lovely London Sky, which is sort of a framing device throughout the piece. Not as much as Chim Chim Cheree, but it's still
stuck in my head at the moment.
Very tonally similar. Jane is now a Labour Party member, mm-hmm. And her mother was a suffragette in the original 25 years earlier. Mm-hmm. For those that don't know, this movie takes place in 1935. The original took place in 1910. So we've had one world war between them.
I feel like part of it too, and that was one of the big things in the reviews that I saw that were negative, were it's just a retelling of the first one, even though it's a sequel, blah blah blah. Which I feel like they were trying to toe that line.
Star Wars Episode 7.
I feel like they were trying to toe the line to not become exactly that, and still nod towards the old one, mm-hmm. and make it new for the kids of today, and also the nods for their parents who were the ones who grew up with it. Which I feel like they did a really okay job kind of balancing that. Some people did not, and that's fine.
That's very much a point that I'll get into when we talk about recommendations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But right now, I'm just going to keep going through these and calling out similarities. Spoonful of Sugar, not a direct parallel with Can You Imagine That, but it's sort of Mary's first real musical number when she shows up.
And there was that nod in that song too. The "Here we go," like.
Yep, and it sort of sets the stage for the sort of adventures that she and the kids are going to go on, and it's like, oh look, I can create magical worlds and make magical things happen.
Yeah. Which, not to like be bringing up another movie again, but that whole Under the Sea moment reminded me of Under the Sea from Bedknobs and Broomsticks, which made me very happy.
That's from Little Mermaid. I haven't seen Bedknobs and Broomsticks.
But anyway, some people might have had issue that I didn't specifically see anything, but I loved it. It just made me happier.
Even more subtle things that might not even have been intentional, but they, like, in the original, Papa Banks, he tore up the letter that the kids wrote, or the advert that the kids wrote for looking for a nanny, and she shows up, and she's got it, and it's all taped back together, and he's just like, what? This one, it's not as directly magical, but there's the whole thing with they're looking for the
okay.
Well, no, specifically they're looking for the certificate of shares.
Yeah.
And and of course Colin Firth tears out the ledger, the page in the ledger that says that they actually have it. Colin Firth is the villain of the piece. I'm just going to throw that out there because I didn't say it before.
I was very upset.
But I mean, it's not much of a twist because it happened so early in the movie. But he seemed so cordial at first, and then he tears out the evidence that they have shares and throws it in the fireplace, and it's very reminiscent of that scene in the original. Which,
if I may interject so quickly, there was a father and his daughter sitting next to us, and at that point, when he rips out the thing and throws it in the fire, the little girl goes, "Can he do that?" Like, legitimately upset, and it was the most precious and adorable thing I've ever heard.
It was really cute.
Legit kid upset.
And then, of course, they ultimately find the certificate of shares because Georgie had taken it and doodled on the back at some point and paper-mache'd it into repairing the kite.
Well, the doodle, it was Michael had done it. And had
you're right. You're right. It wasn't. Yes, Michael, because he was drawing on his father's. Yes, you're right.
I think it was John, the littlest kid.
No, Georgie was the littlest.
No, he wasn't. Really? I thought that too. Yes, I don't know why, but when I was going through IMDb, John was the youngest. Georgie was. I know Georgie's a very like little kid's name. Yeah, that's John.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
I had that same moment, but anyway, yes, no, because it was, and then he took that and it was a cute thing, and then he found the kite.
Yeah. So okay, that makes sense. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The point is, it's reminiscent of what the Father Banks does with the...
Yes. Another, like, one of the subtle kind of nods towards the old film as well was when they were... I think it was when we were introduced to the bank for initially, as, like, the camera was kind of panning over, there was the woman feeding her birds. Like, it's never addressed again, but she was just sitting there feeding her birds on the steps, and I thought it was...
well, at one point, someone does specifically say the word tuppence.
Oh, well, yeah.
In the movie.
He did feed...
He invested your tuppence.
Yeah. But I mean, just, she was never, like, seen or anything. It was just, they pan across and she's there with her birds.
Yep. Jolly Holiday, again, doesn't really have a direct parallel, though there obviously is the whole scene where they jump into a piece of art, in this case, a ceramic bowl, as a decorated ceramic bowl, rather than a sidewalk painting. A lot of really on-the-nose visual homages. I mean, the penguins from the original straight up show up, and Chris O'Dowd is a dog coachman. So that's cool.
That's one of my favorite parts because their outfits were done up in that sort of like the artwork style. Yeah, like there's a word.
They're wearing clothes that's like I don't really know either, but it's like the living paintings pageant from Arrested Development, where it looks they're made of material and seamed and whatnot in a way that evokes cartoons, or paintings or ceramic decoration as is the case here. If anyone ever invented cell shading makeup,
cell shading, that's what it is. I'm sorry, that's all. It was just...
I mean, actual, like it literally, depending on what angle you're at, it draws a line around.
But that's what I was trying to think of. Because
but yes.
Yeah, at conventions, a lot of people do it for like Archer cosplays or like Borderlands specifically.
If anyone ever figures out a way to actually make that work from any angle, though, that'll be that'll change the world of cosplayers. Mm-hmm.
Very pretty art in that scene, though.
But as I was saying...
Yes, I'm sorry.
No direct parallel from Jolly Holiday, though if I had to pick one, it would probably be the covers, not the book, just because there's that sort of flirtatious back and forth between Jack and Mary, or Bert and Mary, as it may be. And plus, Lin-Manuel has that little moment where he does the fast talking, and I was wondering how they were going to figure out a good way to fit that musical styling that he's so well known for into this without it being just like completely out of place. And then, of course, I rewatched the original the next day, and I realized that Bert has a decently long segment like that in Jolly Holiday.
Yeah.
So, also, can we talk about that song just for a second?
Sure.
I love the cover is not the book, but it was a little bit like raunchy.
I mean,
not. I mean, by modern standards, not at all. But
in the context of Mary Poppins,
I was like, am I watching Chicago right now?
Yeah. It didn't pull me out of it in the moment.
Oh no, it didn't even pull me out of it. It was just something I noticed.
But no, like listening to it again later, I kind of, I mean, yeah, it was fair. Like but I feel like part of it too.
Got me going a little bit.
That whole sequence in the ceramic bowl was the kids inside of the, in the dream, in the magic part, like kind of coming to terms with everything happening, because then there's the wolf who's like literally stealing all of their stuff.
Oh yeah.
I feel like it's, and the song itself was about, things aren't always as they appear. So I just feel like it was a lot of like, I guess with the song lyrics too, for the adults in the audience, kind of heavy-handed, like, oh, well, things aren't always what they seem. Like,
and since you bring it up, yes, the wolf, the badger, and the weasel from the animated sequence are voiced and representative of Colin Firth's character and his two associates.
His two bank lawyer dudes.
Yeah. And one thing that really struck me as different about this, as opposed to the original, is there's a straight-up villain. The first one, there are two things that sort of border on villainy, but even they're not. I mean, there's the original bank manager who, and he fires banks, and he tries to take Michael's tuppence, but he's trying to get the kid to invest. He's not like mean-spirited or anything. And then there's just the ever-looming sort of ethereal concept of work-life balance, what it means to be a man. You have to be an island, and you have to, a long life of hard work, and you can't be close to your kids and that sort of thing, and that gets turned, that gets defeated in the end. And this one, straight up villain. They reveal it very early on. He's kind of a dick.
I think that was my biggest moment where I was like, oh my gosh, there's actually this weird. I feel like that villain in a Mary Poppins movie, which is just, it was.
Yeah, I personally didn't care for that angle. I honestly kind of liked the more abstract concept from the original, and it was just so. I appreciate that they revealed it early, almost, just so I didn't spend the whole movie and then it happens and I'm like, what?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was such a clear cut villain, and then an animated version of that villain, and it was. I personally didn't care for it, but it wasn't movie breaking for me. It just wasn't at all what I was expecting.
Yeah, I feel like, and I think it was blatant, like just straight up said too at some point, because for the kids in the audience or whatever. But when we see Colin Firth's character he has a watch. Yeah. And they focus on the watch very specifically, and he kind of swings it, and then when it gets to the wolf, he literally you see the silhouette, and he's swinging the thing, and I'm like, oh gosh, it's Colin Firth, it's the bad guy.
Yep.
But yeah, and then they straight up say it too, which again, for the kids in the audience who may not quite understand, but I like the subtlety of the things like that. It's very nice. I appreciate it.
Back to parallels. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious again doesn't have a song that's quite so ridiculous. But I would compare it to the Royal Dalton Music Hall, if only because there's, it's silly, and she does use at least a few not words in that song. Again, it's not a direct parallel. There's not really a perfect supercalifragilistic, and it's also in the animated sequence, so I may be stretching a little bit there.
I would say
it felt similar to me personally.
Yeah, I didn't. I think I was completely missing it, which I'm okay with, because it kind of sets it apart. I was almost thinking about it too, are they going to kind of try to have that moment? And I like that they didn't, just to kind of again set it apart as its own. That
was definitely one of the more different ones. Yeah. It felt tonally similar to me. You can't deny this. Sorry, you can't deny this. I love to laugh and turning turtle.
Yeah.
Which is, and I wrote this down as eloquently as I could, a relative, Uncle Albert, cousin Topsy.
Uncle.
That lives in a dark alley and has a mysterious affliction that makes them incredibly attracted to the ceiling.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, when she knocked on the door, I straight thought that's who they were going to go see.
I'm just like that. That song is exactly that song.
Oh no, yeah, absolutely.
And don't get me wrong, they're two of my favorite songs from both. But it's that, like, if you're looking for exact beats, that's
100%. And I was fine with it.
Meryl Streep was delightful. I mean, I could watch her do stuff all day, and I actually really like that. Despite the fact that she has such prestige these days, she's still not above like doing children's films and like being whimsical. Mm-hmm. So the other one that's right on a reference to the original is obviously Triple Little Light Fantastic.
Oh yeah,
which is straight up Step in Time, but with Learys instead of chimney sweeps.
I was waiting for it the whole time. I was like, they have to do. Like,
I mean, they've already got the Bert character.
Yeah.
Of course they're gonna. I mean, that's absolutely my favorite. That's the only part from as a child that I legitimately loved about that movie. I love that scene.
So the only thing, like, if I sat there and thought about it, which I did, that like gave me a moment of like removal from the movie, or like the BMX bikes that just straight up showed up out of nowhere in the middle of that song.
What? Really?
Do you know what I'm talking about? The BMX bikes? Like, oh yeah.
No, I mean, I know bicycles.
They were literally doing like BMX tricks, like off like things.
But there's a difference between a BMX trick and a BMX bicycle.
No, yeah, but
they were probably like fixed gear bicycles that were.
Oh no, probably, but it caught me off guard a little bit.
Fair
and
enough.
It felt out of place.
It was not an art style that existed.
Yeah.
Then.
Even
though the technology technically did.
Yeah, it was a very fun, and I mean bicycles obviously did, but just like those that. It was like a moment that I had, and I was like, that's fine.
They should have done it on penny farthings. That would have been sick.
That would have been ridiculous. But I mean, it just gave me a moment where I was like, all right, well, that's going to happen, and then I was fine with it.
Well, yeah. And I really like the song, despite the fact that there's something about Cockney rhyming slang that I like the idea, but it bothers me that not all the words rhyme with the concept they're expressing. It's just the last one. Like, I love that red sauce is dead horse, but when it's like 4 words and it's just the last one that rhymes, I don't know. It's not my place to say. Whatever. It made it into the song. It's cool that they made it into the song, even though my opinions on it. But one thing that I was really happy to finally see, I saw In the Heights off Broadway like 7 years ago, before anyone even really knew who Lin-Manuel was. Obviously, he was not in the production I saw. But one of the few things that I really did internalize and remember about that one is the dancing. There's a lot of really like cool dancing in it. And then we went to see Hamilton some 6 months ago, and again, it wasn't Lin-Manuel in the production that we saw, but I was actually surprised to see how little dancing there was, at least among the main cast. The chorus has some really interesting choreography, and there's a little bit of dancing in a couple of numbers, but for the most part, it's very subdued, and I was a little bit surprised, because after, In the Heights, I figured Lin-Manuel, choreography, and it was nice to finally get a chance to see him dance a little bit. Yeah. And it was cool, and there were elements, there were specific dance moves that were straight out of Step in Time. Yeah. Like the one with the sitting and crossing their legs on nothing. Yeah. And it was a cool scene. It was a fun scene. And honestly, even if all the other musical numbers did not hit similar beats, if this one hadn't been in it, I would have been disappointed. So. Yeah, no, that's fair. And then obviously, Let's Go Fly a Kite is very similar to Nowhere to Go But Up, just with balloons instead of kites, and it's about, refinding your inner child. Which I think is the theme of both of these movies. I think the original executes it a little better. Well, I don't think this one was necessarily, like, specifically about your inner child, but just, like, the sense of whimsy, and, like, if, things are terrible and getting you down, don't forget, it'll always get better. Each song kind of had, like, a lesson, sort of, to it. Yeah. I don't think in the context of that, the Banks kids were the ones that was kind of focused around. I feel like maybe this one more so than the first one. Well, I feel like this one is also probably, unlike the first one was probably mostly targeted at children. I can't say for sure because I was not alive in 1964. But this one, they have that second audience of people who grew up watching the original Mary Poppins and want to do exactly that and sort of go back and, at least stick their toe in their childhood wonder. And of course, that's very prevalent in our society today. Nostalgia is its own industry.
So yeah, I guess it is. It's that double meaning for kids can take one thing from it, adults.
Exactly. Because ultimately, in the end, kids are kids, and they get to be kids. And in my experience, parents want to let their kids be kids as long as possible. Just because once you lose it, it's kind of gone. Like, you can try to recapture it, but you're never going all the way back.
Yeah. There's the moment in the song where Michael's like, I remember everything was true, and that's like the...
And deep down, we all want to be kids again, on some level. I think even the most stoic hard-asses of us wish that they could go back. They've just accepted that they can't. So, but other than that, I mean, that more or less brings me to my one main observation of... the reason I don't think that this movie quite worked as well as the original is because if you think a big part, first of all, I don't think that modern audiences historically, even though we know, contextually, that, the Great Depression was 25 years later, there'd been a whole world war in between the first one and this one, but historically and like socially, those two times, especially the way they're presented here, don't really feel that different to modern audiences.
Okay, yeah.
So, I mean, it would be really interesting and also kind of... I'm not saying I want to see this movie, but I'm saying, like, if they really wanted to do something different, if Mary Poppins came back, like, in the 1980s, that would be a totally different movie. Even if they hit all the same beats, it would just be different enough from the setting. So, really, for me, what I'm saying is, in some ways, this movie doesn't really have anything to offer that the original doesn't, because of that fact. And I'm not saying that's a bad thing, because, again, I'm not the target audience, because as a kid, I didn't really like Mary Poppins all that much. I didn't hate it or anything. It just never really resonated with me. I actually appreciate it more now as an adult, because I understand the historical context and also what it means to be an adult. But also, I appreciate things like the animation and some of the cool special effects that they did back then, when that was that was impressive.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, we had that CGI scene underwater, and while the animation was fine, but it was just like, so?
Yeah.
I mean, the whimsy was more about content than the actual. And then the same thing goes for the animation scene. It's like, it's great that they can still do this, and it's beautiful, but at the same time, it doesn't carry that extra weight that I think the original did. Mm-hmm. That's what it lost for me.
The new and exciting kind of, this is the first time it's happening, and yeah, that's fair.
The one twist that we kind of have to talk about, Dick Van Dyke is in this movie.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not going to lie, it had been so long since I saw the original. I'm so glad that I watched it the next day. That I was like, why did Bert become a banker? What the hell's the context there? And I didn't realize until I rewatched it that he'd also played the old Mr. Dawes. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. It was nice to see him. I honestly would have preferred to see him as Bert, especially because the Dawes that's presented here is so much less blah, 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 than the original. Obviously, it's been 25 years. So, but they found a way to fit him into the movie.
There was that offhanded, well, he's lost it a little bit. He's old and crazy now. So, I mean, it was dancing on the desk and stuff.
Plus, he's still alive. So they were like, we have to. Then again, they couldn't figure out a way to fit in Julie Andrews. And to be honest, that doesn't bother me, because in context, it doesn't really make sense.
Well, I mean, she may not have wanted to be in it, too.
That could be, too. When I found out Julie Walters was in the movie, I was like, how do they make that make sense? And then I was like, oh, Julie Walters.
In the beginning, too, they had teased it with, oh, well, where's Bert? Oh, traveling the world. So it's like, oh, I guess he won't be in it. And then he was, the actor anyway was in the end.
England is in the world. He could come back.
True.
So, Cady.
James.
I feel like at this point, it's pretty clear, but would you recommend this movie to moviegoers?
I 100% would. Especially if, maybe not especially. So you're the type of person who can kind of separate in your mind, an older movie that's kind of, been brought back to life. Not necessarily get, super upset about some differences or similarities. Or if you have a kid who you want to kind of get introduced to this magical world of Mary Poppins, it's definitely the movie for you. Yeah, I 100% would. I mean, even if not, just go see it. It's super fun. Mm-hmm. Super fun, good movie. James?
Yep.
Would you recommend Mary Poppins Returns?
I would to, I think, most people. Again, as I said, I'm really not the target audience, because unlike you, where Mary Poppins was like one of your favorite movies as a kid, it was never one of mine. But at this point, I personally feel like this movie doesn't really offer me anything other than, more than the original did. Other than, obviously, the production value is a little bit bigger and better. But I'm more about the content and things like that. That said, it's a very well-made film. It does have all the same magic as the original, I think, in many ways, minus the obviously technological advances that we've experienced in the last 50 years. So yes, I think that if you really, really loved the original as Cady did, I think that, and you're the kind of person who wants to just enjoy a movie that can sort of remind you of something that you deeply love, I think this will do it. It's not like the movie cuts off the original Mary Poppins face and wears it as a mask. It feels right.
That'd be a very different movie.
I would watch the shit out of that. And obviously, if you have kids, I think, especially very young kids who the idea of animation even existing is still kind of they don't understand the difference between a cartoon and the real world and things like that. If you want to bring them to this movie, I mean, spot on, because that's really the only way you can recapture the magic of, oh my god, they just jumped into a cartoon in the 60s, in the 1910s. So yes, I would certainly not I would not advise anyone to not see it. Again, dead inside, understand the appeal. If you're not dead inside, and or you really love the original, yeah, I'd recommend it. Well, I guess that just about wraps up Cady and Cady for 2018, huh?
How time has flown. Time passes.
Yep.
It is gone.
Yeah. That's how time works.
Yep. Well, as usual, if you enjoyed the video, please comment, subscribe, like the video, pass it on. Also, unrelated, you should go see this movie a bunch of times. As many times as it takes you to save up a bunch of, movie stubs. And then you should go and buy a kite, and then use the movie stubs to kind of, patch up the kite, because, when you buy a kite, sometimes they have, little holes in them if it's a used kite. Go outside, wait for a very windy day, not a stormy day. Safety first, just wind. Fly the kite, have some fun. It'll get caught by a gust of wind eventually. And, it'll drag you off to magical worlds. It'll be fun. It's a fun adventure.
Okay. Well, until next time, we have been
Cady and Cady. See you next year.
Oh, it's a jolly holiday with Mary.
Hey, you remember that time that Mary Poppins descended from the heavens to purge the Antichrist from Harry Potter?
No, I don't.
Look it up.
Merry Christmas!